Good morning to the media and members of the viewing public. Welcome to the United National Congress weekly Sunday press conference. Today, my colleague and I will address the continued systematic, deliberate, and malicious assaults and attacks on our democratic institutions, values, and norms by this government led by the Prime Minister. We will be looking at the assaults on our democratic institutions. For example, the Police Service Commission being the latest victim of this deliberate, calculated, and malicious assault. And of course, the systematic decimation of the trade union movement and the collective bargaining process. With me this morning is the Honorable and Distinguished Member of Parliament for Poover South, Rudranath Indarsingh. He will deal with the decimation of our trade unions and the systematic assault on the collective bargaining process. I would like to begin this morning's press conference by stating categorically to the people of this country that political barbarians are at our gates. It is time for the people to erect barricades to defend our democracy, the rule of law, and the people's fundamental freedoms and human rights. My brothers and sisters, our democracy is facing great peril as the Rowley-led administration continue its assault on our democratic institutions, norms, and values. We are in a dangerous place. We are in dangerous waters. For example, we have witnessed over the last 5 years, 6 years, and more so over the last 2 weeks, the complete lawlessness and misbehavior, disrespect, and utter contempt shown towards the people by the Attorney General and, of course, the band leader, the ringleader, the Prime Minister himself. Brothers and sisters, no one is above the law. No one is above the law in our land. But the Attorney General gives the impression, as the highest legal advisor to the government, that he is above the law. And we have seen the conduct of this Attorney General deteriorate on a continuous scale over the last 6 years. Let me just draw some examples for your edification. Remember that this Attorney General is conflicted. He's a businessman and he's also an Attorney General. As a businessman, he's in the wrong profession. He should not be the Attorney General. But the Prime Minister, who we also understand, is a behind-the-scenes businessman himself. And he can clarify for us if that is not a fact. Because he has a farm in Tobago, rearing goat and sheep. So that is a business. So the Prime Minister is also, from our information, a businessman. So he too is in the wrong profession. The Attorney General, as an example, because of his business interests, as the Attorney General, has had to recuse himself on some 37 occasions as the Attorney General of this country during cabinet meetings. This Attorney General and his family are involved in many business transactions. And when they come before the cabinet, he has had to recuse himself. The Attorney General, as you recall, his children, as you recall, were involved in the carrying of heavy weapons at a military range some time ago, breaching several laws, including the Firearms Act and the Children's Authority Act. The same Attorney General is conflicted by renting, or when he rented, his number 3 Alexandra Street Place building in St. Clair to the government of this country and extracting more than $600,000 a month, over $20 million during a 3-year cycle. This is the same Attorney General who has assaulted the people's fundamental human rights and freedoms by converting special majority legislation into simple legislation over the past 6 years. I draw 3 examples for your edification and enlightenment. The Interception of Communications Act. It was a special majority. He converted it into a simple majority. The Gaming, Betting and Gambling Act. It was a special majority, and the AG converted it into a simple majority. And the last but not least, legislation that required a special majority, the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. He converted that into a simple majority. I want to repeat, no one is above the law of our country. And to give you another example of the misbehavior and misconduct of our Attorney General, I draw this matter to your attention. On March the 8th, 2019, in the House of Representatives, the Attorney General shared the following statement with the members of that House and by extension the wider public. He stated, and I quote, "Tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance, knock yourself out. Avoid as much as you want. End of quote. That is a statement from our Attorney General. Did Mr. Faris Alwari, as a former Port of Spain City Corporation alderman between 2003 and 2006, purchased an apartment 4B at Siboney Towers in January of 2004 from one Vishal Pratap Singh at a price of $1.85 million, and later resold to another party some 2 years later for at least $3.75 million. I asked the Attorney General, did this former Port of Spain City Corporation alderman, now Attorney General, along also, or should I ask, did he pay the requisite stamp duty on that at that material time? The reason being, brothers and sisters, is that this property went through a series of transactions which eventually culminated in the sale to one Martin Snyder on April the 21st, 2006. I want to ask the Attorney General, is he aware that there was supposed to be 3 separate stamp duty payments to be made to the Board of Inland Revenue based on these transactions at apartment 4B? I bring these matters to your attention, members of the public, to let you know that these are very serious and grave transgressions against the citizens of this country. And the latest excursion into adventurism by the Attorney General is the circumstances surrounding the sale, purported sale, and transfer of a vehicle, PCY 84, to one Mr. Roger Kewal Singh. But before we deal with that particular one, I want to bring to your attention the following. You see, this is our Constitution. This is the supreme court law of the land, and no one is above the Constitution. We read with some degree of dismay the Attorney General disingenuously attempting to run away from his responsibility for the mess he created at the Police Service Commission, resulting in its collapse and the resignation of all the members of that commission. Today, in today's Guardian, this is the headline: Fire for the Attorney General. And the fire for the Attorney General has come about over the COP-PSC fiasco and Legal Notice 183. Pressures from within the PNM for Faris to go. And the PM, Prime Minister, stays clear of the Kewal Singh matter. This headline ought to have been, Fire the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has literally infringed and breached several laws, and he has also undermined by his actions our Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I read with some degree of dismay in today's Newsday on page 10, a story that should concern every citizen in this country. A story entitled in today's Newsday on page 10, DPP in the dark over deal signed between the Attorney General and State Witness Vincent Nelson. This is what is in the Newsday today on page 10. I happened to get in my mailbox today on my way here a document. This is a document I got in my mailbox on my way to this press conference. It is a secret document, a secret agreement signed between Faris Alwari as Attorney General and Vincent Nelson. Well, we want to ask the Attorney General whether he can shed any light on this agreement that I got in my mailbox and which is now in the Newsday of today's date, where it is alleged that the Attorney General signed a secret deal with one Mr. Vincent Nelson sometime in 2017, I believe. And we would like the Attorney General to clear the air on this matter. Whether in November of 2017, you, Attorney General, signed this secret deal. Has the Attorney General superseded and taken over the role of the police? Has the Attorney General superseded and taken over the role and functions of the Director of Public Prosecutions? Well, how else can we explain this secret deal? This is a travesty. This is almost an abomination that an Attorney General, according to this secret deal, was able to enter into secret agreements with one Vince Nelson in a matter that is before the courts of Trinidad and Tobago today, involving a former Attorney General and an Attorney at Law. So we want the Attorney General to tell this nation whether he's aware of this secret deal that was entered between himself and one Vincent Nelson on November or sometime in November of 2017. I do not know if the Attorney General, is this your signature, Attorney General? There's a signature on this document. We would like to know if that's your signature. Because if this is your signature, this is not only misconduct and misbehavior in public office. This is an invasion, Attorney General, into police work. You are undermining, if this is true, you are undermining the work of the police service. And you are undermining the work of the Director of Public Prosecution. The Newsday in today's article said that you promised to recommend to the DPP in this secret agreement to discontinue any criminal prosecution or not to take any criminal action against this individual. It was an indemnity, essentially, that you entered into according to this secret agreement, Attorney General. So we want you to clear the air on this matter. We want you to clear the air on this Newsday article on page 10 this morning. This is criminal misbehavior on the part of our Attorney General if this turns out to be true. The extent to which he would go to frame up, trump up charges against his opponents. I'm not saying that he did that, but I'm saying that is what is coming out in this particular newspaper article and in this secret agreement that I have before me. This is dangerous business, Attorney General. And you are not above the law. You are not above the law, and the Prime Minister is not above the law. This document states that it was signed by you on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The question is Dr. Rowley aware of this agreement? Dr. Rowley, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, must clear the air on this secret agreement signed between the Attorney General and one Mr. Vincent Nelson. I saw that there is an address somewhere in London, and when I searched for this address, the house is for sale for £1 million. This address that is on this secret agreement, the house is for sale for £1 million as we speak. This is a serious incursion, invasion of our democracy, our rights and freedoms, and it says that the Attorney General, if this is true, is undermining the office of the DPP and is undermining the office and the service called the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Attorney General, I turn over to you. Clear the air. I am not yet ready to accuse you at the moment for any misdeeds. I want you to authenticate. I want you to verify this document, and I want you to also deny Newsday story today. And then, Mr. Attorney General, we will take you where you supposed to take us. I want to remind you, in the good book, there is a term or there's a statement, but don't take it literally. The wages of sin, they say it's death in the Bible. I say the wages of sin is political death. Mr. Attorney General, you owe it to the country to clear the air on this matter. This is an attack on our democracy, the rule of law, the rights and freedoms of our citizens. The Attorney General and the Prime Minister are involved in a conspiracy to inflict a totalitarian and authoritarian system on our nation. This is the only conclusion that we can come to based on what we are reading. It is frightening. It is dangerous. It is disturbing. It calls for action. Members of the media, we go now to the fiasco. Finally, I want to go to the fiasco involving the Police Service Commission. Even the Express in today's editorial, the Express editorial today says, and I quote, look at here, red flag, not red herring, Mr. Prime Minister. Dr. Rowley, do not take the country and its people for a bunch of fools. We are not fools, Dr. Rowley. This is no rah-rah. This is no smoke herring or red herring. This is real. And you as Prime Minister have failed to tell this country whether it was you, Mr. Prime Minister, who inserted yourself in a meeting involving the President of the Republic and Bliss C. Prasad. You had a press conference for 2.5 hours yesterday, and not on one occasion did you tell the country, whether it was you, our political leader and incoming Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisasa, indicated that we have reliable and credible information that it was you. We want you now to deny whether it was you. We have information. We have been advised. And we are asking you to clear the air on this matter. So, I want to say that there are many issues that the Attorney General and the Prime Minister have to account for. This matter of the sale of the car and the transfer, I just want to say in closing, is a bit worrying. Here is the check, dated June of 2016. And here is the letter. January, the letter of transfer, January of 2016. This Attorney General seemed to be delusional. He seemed to be disconnected from reality. I have never seen in my life time where you transfer a car before you get money for the car that you are selling. So the AG transferred a car in January and collected $600,000 in June. How can that be real? How can that be possible? And the gentleman has been driving his car for almost 5 years. How did he get his new sticker to give him the right to drive on the road? He must have had to produce ownership of the vehicle. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we reiterate our call for the removal, dismissal, resignation of the Attorney General. The Attorney General is not fit for office. I have given you examples of this pattern of misbehavior and misconduct by the Attorney General of our country. His position is untenable. We cannot sustain that. The people cannot sustain the Attorney General one more day in office. So we call today for the dismissal of the Attorney General. If he does not resign, he must be dismissed from office. I'd like to pause at this time and invite my honorable colleague, Rudranath Indar Singh, to address this matter concerning the decimation of the movement and the collapse of the collective bargaining process, another important institution under assault by this gangster-type criminal PNM government. I turn over to my colleague, Rudranath Indar Singh.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Wade Mark. As I continue with this morning's press conference, as it relates to the continued assault on independent institutions in Trinidad and Tobago and systems under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and his high-handed, arrogant, dictatorial, contemptuous government, a government that has no respect for the citizens that voted them into office, has no respect for the wider citizenry of the country, and continues to brutalize, assault, lie, deceive the working class, the leadership of the trade union movement in Trinidad and Tobago, and into their 7th year, they continue this assault, which has been clearly demonstrated in terms of what has unfolded over the last 6 years You see, my brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago, to understand the PNM, you have to deal with the facts. And you have to go back to their manifesto of 2015 on pages 67, 68, and 69. Promise the stars and the moon for the labor movement, in where they committed themselves to ensuring proper industrial relations practices and effective democratic trade unions, and promised a timely settlement of all outstanding wage negotiations and salary negotiations, and facilitating the tripartite engagement between government, labor, and employer to foster and develop a peaceful, competitive, and productive industrial relations environment. How have we been deceived and betrayed over the last 6 years? Because what we should be concerned about as a nation, because last Wednesday we saw photographs splashed across all the newspapers in this country of the workers of Lake Asphalt on bended knees, pleading, asking God to intervene for wages and salaries that they worked for, their blood, sweat, and tears. They could no longer appeal to the Prime Minister and his cabinet, his Minister of Labor, but they had to seek divine intervention. And that, for me, is a defining moment, and it really projects what has transpired to the labor movement over the last 6 years, promising the moon and the stars, promising gold and glitter, and then having to end up on your knees, crawling on your bellies, and wailing, moaning, and groaning for what you rightfully earned, as they continue to abuse and whip workers, my brothers and sisters. And this has been clearly demonstrated, and we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the real agenda of the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley at Lake Asphalt, at Wassa, at the port of Port of Spain, in relation to their continued narrative that there is the need to restructure these state entities? And what occurred at Lake Asphalt didn't occur overnight. It has been on the radar of the opposition for the last 2 years. And I have to ask the question this morning, is the government of Dr. Keith Rowley engaging in exercises where they tell you that we have an interministerial committee overseeing a way forward for state enterprises, and they are casting it through the wayside, or they are throwing it through the window and so on? Because there was an interministerial committee at Lake Asphalt headed by one Minister Alison West, the Minister of Public Administration, and the Minister of Labor, the MP for Labrie, is on this interministerial committee, and the late Franklin Khan, the Minister of Energy. And in fact, when the opposition, through my colleague Senator Wade Mark, had questioned him in the Senate on the status of the interministerial committee's report, the remarks was amazing. This is a government that committed itself to open transparency and governance. And when questioned, he said that he could not divulge the contents of this interministerial committee report. Where else could you question a government minister other than in the parliament? They have sworn an oath of office to ensure that there is truth and transparency in all affairs of the government. And I'm forced to ask the question why they do not want this interministerial committee's report to be made public. And this morning, I challenge the Minister of Energy, Minister Stuart Young, to make this inter-ministerial committee report public so that we could find the true answers? And is there a plot within the operations of the government to create a narrative where they would want the country to believe that the workers of Lake Aswal are indeed a drain on the treasury, and then they go in the direction of not dialogue and consensus building and finding a new business model through working with the recognized majority union, the Contractors and General Workers Trade Union, but they closed down, just as they did to Petrotrin when the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, lied to the country. He lied to all the workers of Petrotrin when he made that famous pronouncement that if you had your head in the freezer, you was not listening to him, close the fridge door, close the freezer door. The government was not closing down Petrotrin, and it moved from not closing down to Wilfred Espinay, all must go. Are the workers of Lake Aswal going to suffer the same fate? And are we not being told what is the real agenda? Is there some business maneuvering where some financier friend or supporter of the People's National Movement of Dr. Rowley would emerge to be the new owners or business partners at Lake Aswal? And in that regard too, I have to ask the question, what has happened to the report at WASA, which was dated the 11th of December 2020 and signed by the Minister of Public Utilities, Marvin Gonzalez, the late Franklin Khan, Camille Robinson Regis, Stuart Young, Donna Cox, and Penelope Beckles? What is the status of a report that has been compiled and studied and analyzed by our government over the last 2 years? And I am told, because there seems to be another sinister agenda somewhere, a senior government minister in their tete-a-tete and in their socializing and so on, told the Minister of Public Utilities, and I challenge the Minister of Public Utilities to tell me that I am not talking the truth, where that senior government minister told the Minister of Public Utilities, why are you wasting your time trying to restructure WASA and work with the stakeholders and the unions? Let us close down WASA. Let us find a foreign business entity to come in and we would all make money. That is the modus operandi of the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. And it sends me to the other area of restructuring in terms of the port of Port of Spain. Another interministerial committee that was headed by Alison West. And this interministerial committee has been abandoned. In fact, the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union was and stakeholder on this committee. It was sent to the cabinet for analysis, and it never had the signatories of the stakeholders and full involvement and full sign-off. Why? Again, is it again to facilitate where you close down the entire port, you send home workers, you add to the already 130,000 workers who have lost their jobs under this government, and you enter into backdoor maneuvering and financial maneuvering where you find business partners outside of the jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago, and who is to benefit financially? Are there government ministers? Are there financiers and supporters? Because we were told that there were business partners who were eyeing the prime assets of the port of Port of Spain from Hong Kong and France. And again, we have not heard anything from the Minister of Works and Transport, Rohan Sinanan, who told the country that he was a very honest politician in terms of how he conducts his affairs. And the PNM is full of honest and law-abiding ministers of government. And what we have seen over the last 6 years is the furthest thing from the truth. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we in the United National Congress, we are concerned about the abandonment of interministerial committee reports and how the government is operating in a very high-handed manner. There seems to be a clique, there seems to be a cabal within the operations of the cabinet, and there is not full transparency and ventilation of the issues that are affecting the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This is why NGC could have invested $700 million in failed projects, and we cannot hold no one accountable because, again, the Prime Minister and his cabinet and his board seem to be above the law, and they are not prepared to account to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. And this leads me to the very important issue of the state of collective bargaining process and where we are in this country. Because recently, my brothers and sisters, the Minister of Planning and Development, Camille Robinson Regis, who has presided over the collapsed Tripartite Advisory Council on, I think under her watch it collapsed about 3 times. So anything Camille Robinson Regis is involved in, it is chaos, it is catastrophe. So catastrophic Camille invited or summoned the government, business and labor fraternity to discuss workplace vaccination, or to discuss a meeting as it relates to COVID-19 vaccine for employees. And it is very clear when she stated that vaccine mandate is not a state policy. And within 24 hours of summoning business, government and labor stakeholders under her watch, we have seen a headline: UDCOT sends unvaccinated employee on leave, in the person of one Crystal Edwards, who posted a video to social media where she was told by the management of UDCOT that unvaccinated employees or workers will not be allowed into the head office located on Sackville Street in Port of Spain unless they presented a negative PCR. Who, and today I want to ask the Prime Minister, who, because UDCOT is no longer under any line minister, it is under the Prime Office of the Prime Minister. And I want to ask the Prime Minister, has he instructed Noel Garcia to implement a policy of mandatory vaccines for workers at UDCOT? And I am forced to ask the question again, is this now one where UDCOT 2 has placed 20 unvaccinated workers at a separate office? And what will happen to workers of an unvaccinated nature in the public service and other state entities? It is horrifying that while we are singing our national anthem that every creed and race find an equal place, it is clear that unvaccinated workers do not. And I want to ask the government, what is the real agenda as it relates to public service workers, both permanent and contract? And is this official government policy? And this is why you cannot trust Camille Robinson Regis in relation to her being the head of the National Tripartite Advisory Council. And this morning, if she has lied, she has deceived the business and labor fraternity in this country, Camille Robinson Regis too must go. She must be relieved of her ministerial portfolio and responsibilities. And then I want to turn very quickly to the issues as it relates to what is transpiring as it relates to the collective bargaining process for workers and teachers and members of the public service. Because the minister, there was a bold headline, Minister thanks nurses for reporting to duty as it relates to when the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association told or called upon workers to do a day or embark on a day of prayer based on the failure of the government to address the collective bargaining process. And again, the government has no respect, because in terms of the vaccination policy that we have seen which emanated at UDCOT, the government has no respect for the president of the industrial court. The government has no respect for the independence of the industrial court, because this is an assault on the position that has been adopted. There is no legislation, there is no public health regulation before the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and the president of the industrial court has made it very clear that no employer in this country can impose any mandatory vaccination on workers in this country. They cannot unilaterally change your terms and conditions of employment, and that is why we are saying that this is a clear undermining of the office of the president and an attack on another arm of the judiciary of this country, which is established by the constitution of this country. And the very fact that the government cannot indicate to you up till today how many negotiations that they have settled in the public sector. The government of Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar was able to settle 135 negotiations in 5 years and find $5 billion to effect outstanding salary settlement and increase the minimum wage from $9.50 to $15 per hour. And I could go on and on in terms of the gains that we provided for the labor movement. Today, we have a wage freeze that has been instituted by the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, because in 2021, workers are still working on 2012 and 2013 salaries. And in the middle of the pandemic and in the fight against COVID-19, where public health workers have remained very committed, and workers at large in the public service and in the private sector and so on, this is a government that continues to treat workers with the greatest sense of contempt and disregard and disdain and arrogance. Because if they had any respect for the Industrial Relations Act, which is part of the labor laws of this country, under the constitution of this country, the government would have facilitated the collective bargaining process. And this is why nurses had to stay home and reflect. And while they want to tell you that they were able to have a success story and nurses did not black out on that particular day, my sources in the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association told me at Sandy Grande there was only 35% of the staff working. Point Fortin Hospital, 90% of the staff stayed away. The Port of Spain General Hospital, 40%. Tobago Hospital, 45%. And at Mount Hope, 55%. And today, I want to ask the Minister of Health, Minister Dayal Singh, your continued treatment of workers in the healthcare system will not cut it And have you studied, or what is your position on the implementation of a national nurse to patient ratio policy, which would have gone a long way in reducing morbidity and mortality in our nation's hospitals? Best practice or international standards for medical and surgical wards indicate that there must be one nurse per 4 to 5 patients, and currently in our healthcare system there is one or between 1 to 3 nurses for a maximum of 20 patients, and there is a sustained exodus of nurses on a daily basis. And do not come and lie to the population and tell the population that you have filled, or the Ministry of Health has filled the over 1,500 vacancies existing from the point of view of nurses. You are filling it with only, and I'm told that only 300 nursing assistants and patient care assistants were recruited, and they have not been trained. They do not have the experience, and they are being recruited on what we would call 3 to 6 months contract, no permanent employment. And what we have found in addition to that is that all nurses in Tobago are on a 2-year contract, and those nurses who are retiring are being who have retired are owed their gratuity payments. And I'm told that retired nurses are not getting their pension in a timely manner throughout all the 5 regional health authorities. And is it now that the pension plan for all healthcare workers are in trouble because workers are being reduced from a permanent basis? And I challenge you to tell the country and tell the healthcare workers whether their pension plan, which is held in trust at Republic Bank, is in financial troubles, just as what is occurring with the National Insurance Fund. So, my brothers and sisters, this morning we have to understand that there is an industrial relations crisis, because thousands of teachers also embarked on a blackout call recently, and it had to do, which impacted upon primary and secondary schools throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and it had to do over the way that the government treated or has treated tutor in relation to its refusal to start salary negotiations for teachers since 2012. Their outstanding incremental arrears, primary school teachers working for 10 years and not being upgraded, vacancies in the teaching service not being filled, insufficient infrastructure to support the ministry's decision of physical and virtual teaching simultaneously, and an increased expense of teaching for teachers in using personal Wi-Fi service, with no reflection of this in terms of their salaries. So we have also police service, law enforcement officers who are working on 2012 salaries. We have local and daily rated employees. We have all arms of the public service that are working on 2012 salaries. And this is why we are saying that the government has decimated, the government has assaulted the industrial relations process, the free and fair collective bargaining, and that is why we are challenging the government. The Minister of Labour, where is the Minister of Labour? Steve McClatchy. He cannot report to the Parliament, he cannot report to the trade union movement how many negotiations his government has settled. And while workers are working on 2012 salaries, they are being abused, they are being insulted, they are being treated in the most callous of manners by this government. We see an environment where workers now are being called upon to pay more, whether it is for the traveling public because maxi taxis have increased their fares, retailers, producers, manufacturers are increasing the price of goods and services. Recently, bread, we saw from a major confectionery producer, KC Confectionery, indicating that the price of confectionery will be increased. And we are not manufacturing this in terms of the inflationary trend in the country. The latest monetary policy announcement from the central bank has indicated that the latest information from the Central Statistical Office shows that food inflation year on rose from 3.2% to 4.9% in July 20 of 2021. The largest increase was recorded for vegetable, fruits, milk, cheese, and eggs. So what you really have is virtually 100% or more than 50% in terms of an increase in food price, the prices of food. And that is why we are saying that the ordinary man, the ordinary worker in this country is being inflicted with runaway inflation in this country, and the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has no answer for the poor and the oppressed, the vulnerable, the 130,000 persons who have lost their jobs. And the signals are they want to inflict more pain and suffering with the implementation of the property tax. Increases in electricity rates are looming, increases in water rates are looming, and your salaries are remaining fixed, and workers who are existing on the minimum wage, they have no idea of how to put bread and butter on the table. This is why one worker at Lake Asphalt was concerned about losing his wife if he cannot get salary payments on a timely basis. And this is why we are saying today to the labor movement, to the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago, that enough is enough. The government must no longer continue to attack the independent and free collective bargaining process under the Industrial Relations Act of this country. The government must not continue to assault the office of the President of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and the government must not assault the independence of the Industrial Court of this country. No government minister is above the law. The Prime Minister is not above the law, and the government must, the people must ensure that we apply the necessary pressure on the government to ensure that it subscribes to the rule of law and respects the Constitution and democracy of this country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, my colleague. Members of the media, if you have any questions, the floor is now open at this time. You can direct your questions. Thank you.
Senator Wade Mark, I will begin with you.
Okay.
The Prime Minister held a press conference yesterday in which he said that the police service is still functioning and there is rank within the police service, and that the issue as it relates to the police service commission was not a crisis. What is your take on that?
My take on it is simply this. The Prime Minister has to answer certain questions that the population require clarification on. And this flippant, cavalier approach that the Prime Minister has taken on a very serious matter of trust and confidence, that they are in fact weakening, eroding, and subverting. It is as if the Prime Minister is seeking to extract from the population a license to mash up the place. They are mashing up institutions in the country because at the end of the day, their objective is to control and to dominate the entire population. So I would like to say, in response to you, some questions I would like to ask the Prime Minister based on your question. I would like to ask the Prime Minister, who did Bliss C. Prasad discuss the confidential merit list with? Who convinced Ms. Bliss C. Prasad not to proceed to present that list to the President? Who facilitated the meeting at President's house? Or I should ask, where was this meeting facilitated? Why has the President, Paula May Weeks, the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, and the former Police Service Commission Chairman, Bliss C. Prasad, not spoken on this issue? Was there collusion between these high office holders in the actions of an independent constitutional institution? Can you trust that there is no political PNM, political interference in any other institution that is supposed to be independent? So what I am saying in response to your question is simply this. The government of Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley has done everything in its power to undermine the Police Service Commission and ultimately determine, and if you listen to his words carefully yesterday, the Prime Minister has now determined who the next Commissioner of Police will be. Hear what the Prime Minister said. The Prime Minister told the country yesterday that when the court rules on the 15th of October of this month, 14th or 15th, that the process involving the appointment of an acting Commissioner of Police is unlawful and illegal, then what it means is that the only Deputy Commissioner of Police approved by the Parliament is the current Deputy Commissioner of Police, who is acting as Commissioner of Police. That is Mr. McDonald Jacob. So what the Prime Minister is doing, he's telling the country, I do not want Gary Griffith as any acting police commissioner ever in Trinidad and Tobago. And if the court rules in his favor, what he told the country is that the person who is next in line to take over the police service is a gentleman whose appointment was approved by the Parliament in 2020. That is the current acting Commissioner of Police, whose appointment as acting Commissioner of Police ends on the 15th of October this year. So the Prime Minister knows what he's doing, he knows what he's saying. So that is why he can tell you and the country there's no crisis. We are engaged in rah-rah. And this is all about smoke, herring, and red herrings. The Prime Minister needs to tell the country what role he played in this whole fiasco. That is why we have asked him to tell the country whether he was the individual who inserted himself on this discussion on August the 12th that caused the Police Service Commission chairperson not to hand the merit list to Her Excellency on an acting Commissioner of Police, but went back to the office with that list. So that is how I believe the Prime Minister could tell us today there is no crisis, only rah-rah and red herrings Yeah, that is what the Prime Minister, that is his conduct. And that is why the Express pointed out today. This, the Express of our country is saying in an editorial, this is not a red herring, Mr. Prime Minister. This is a red flag. Our democracy is at stake. If a Prime Minister can select a commissioner of police, then what is preventing that Prime Minister in converting that police service into a private army belonging to the PNM? And then what will happen is anarchy in the country. The rule of law would be broken down, because whoever the Prime Minister tells the Commissioner of Police, who he has handpicked to head the police service, to go after, that gentleman will go after. I am not saying Mr. Jacob is a puppet. All I'm saying is the Prime Minister is attempting to control and dominate all our democratic institutions in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And he behaves as if he's innocent. He knows nothing. He hears nothing. He sees nothing. There's no crisis. Take your mind back to one situation, the collapse of the Tobago Sea Bridge, and you will understand the methodology of the Prime Minister. Whatever he cannot control, he destroys. And out of the chaos, he chooses who he wants to be whatever he wants. That is a danger. That's why I said earlier in this press conference that Trinidad and Tobago faces danger. We are in dangerous waters. This is highly disturbing, what you have just asked, that in the face of what is called a constitutional and moral crisis in our country, the Prime Minister could flippantly and cavalierly simply say, listen, you know what? There's no crisis. Only rara. That is my response.
Senator, do you think that this is an opportunity? There are some who have indicated that this is an opportunity for recognition within the police service. Do you see that as being so?
I believe that the time has come, and I think our party attempted that during its term of office to embark on what is called meaningful constitutional reform. I think that the Constitution has to be reformed, and there is need for more checks and balances to be placed in our Constitution. Right now, the Constitution has established a modern governor, a modern king, a modern emperor, and a modern governor. That is what we have in the persona of the Prime Minister. He has total power under our Constitution. And even though there are checks and balances within the Constitution, it needs to have men and women of integrity, of honesty, of decency, of dignity, to ensure that there is no crossing or blurring of the lines of the separation of powers. But where you have a gentleman hungry for power and committed to establishing a totalitarian and authoritarian state, you have the blurring of lines, and what you have is a poisoning of the well. So that is why today we are in this crisis of not having a sitting police service commission to appoint a commissioner of police. Who was responsible for that? That responsibility lies at the feet of two persons. The drafter of legal notice number 183, the Attorney General, and the second person is the Prime Minister. In fact, he might be the ringleader of this whole conspiracy that now faces TNT. And that is why we asked him for the last time. but it's not going to be last time, only for today. Whether you, Mr. Prime Minister, was the public official who inserted yourself in a conversation between the President of the Republic as well as the former Chairman, Mrs. C. Prasad. The President of our country needs to answer this question. The former Chairman of the Police Service Commission needs to tell the country who that official really was. And the Prime Minister has a responsibility to inform this nation whether he was the public official who inserted himself at that meeting. These are very, very critical questions that the country is asking and the country is crying out for. Because trust and confidence are waning. And when you destroy institutions, norms, and values, you lay the basis for chaos, anarchy, and confusion, where the rule of law is undermined, where your rights and freedoms are subverted, and where democracy is translated into a totalitarian and or authoritarian and or fascist state. That is what we face.
Yeah. On the issue of mandatory vaccines, the opposition leader in the United National Congress had made it very clear that we have articulated and we have supported vaccination for all the persons of Trinidad and Tobago, all the citizens who are entitled to. As it relates to mandatory vaccination, there is no legislation or there is no public health guidelines that are before the Parliament of this country. And in that regard, we in the United National Congress, we are very concerned because where is the workplace policy that the Minister of Planning enunciated about a month ago? She should have been proactive when she summoned the labor community and the business community, and she should have spelled out, this is what we want to do, this is our policy or guideline, this is what we contemplate. And therefore, if there is nothing before the Parliament, we cannot support. And we are saying, based on what we have seen emerge at UDCOT, and what we have seen where the government has stated that vaccine mandate is not their policy, is just some surreptitious plan on the part of the Prime Minister and his cabinet to implement a mandatory vaccination policy through the back door. And today we challenge the Prime Minister, bring whatever you have to bring to the Parliament and let us debate it, let us ventilate it, manus. Do not act like a coward and instruct your agents and state entities to continue to intimidate, harass, and subject employees who are committed to Trinidad and Tobago, who are committed workers. Do not treat them as second class citizens in this country.
Mr. Indar Singh, in light of that, does the party support, does the UNC support mandatory vaccinations?
I have made my position very clear, and I think that this is something that the media should be asking the Prime Minister, the media should be asking the Attorney General, and the media should be asking the Minister of Health in terms of what is their position on mandatory vaccine, and are they prepared to bring whatever legislation or public health guidelines. And until that, we have made our position clear in terms of this whole vaccination issue.
Just standing for the record, just state what that position is again, please, sir, if you don't mind. And in terms of, you spoke earlier to issues surrounding increases that we have seen occurring publicly. And we know that, of course, tomorrow is the budget day in Trinidad and Tobago. What is the opposition looking at in terms of, what do you anticipate, and what do you hope for the labor movement as the budget will be read tomorrow?
Well, we are at a very critical juncture in our history from an economic development point of view. And for me, 130,000 persons have lost their job. Quite a substantial percentage of persons, I cannot recollect it, are living under the poverty line. There is no job creation in this country. There has been no diversification. And the last 6 budgets have brought nothing that has improved the standard of living and quality of life of the citizens of this country. This was the focus of development under a government led by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. And this is why we presented a National Transformation Economic Plan for 2020 to 2025. And we believe that whatever that is brought by Colm Imbert will not transform Trinidad and Tobago, and we believe that the pillars of government, of development in this country can be found in this National Economic Transformation Plan 2020 to 2025.
Let me just add something to my colleague's statement.
Sure.
The United National Congress supports vaccination on a voluntary basis. We have said that citizens, before they take their vaccines, must or should consult their doctors to check themselves to make sure everything is okay. However, we are not, I want to repeat, we are not in favor of mandatory vaccinations at this particular point of time. We are not in favor. So bring the legislation to make vaccination mandatory. You have to bring legislation, or you have to amend existing legislation to give effect to that. And when you make things mandatory, you need a special constitutional majority for that. I believe that is the reason why they are refusing to bring legislation, and they are working through the back door in order to introduce a kind of mandatory vaccination exercise without calling it mandatory vaccination. As my colleague said, the President of the Industrial Court has made it very clear. There is no law in this country that deals with mandatory vaccination policies, and therefore, if an employer, be it state or private sector, want or wish to introduce such a policy, there must be consultation between the trade unions and the employer, or the workers and the employer, with a view to arriving at some kind of agreement between parties. You cannot impose mandatory vaccination on any citizen in this country. That is our position.
In terms of, we've seen yesterday as well the discussion as it relates to the safe zones, and we've seen the fines outlined for unvaccinated people within the safe zones. What is the opposition's view on the safe zones implemented as the country seeks to reopen following lockdowns to combat the COVID-19 pandemic?
Again, we would have liked much more dialogue and consultation on this matter, rather than the government unilaterally imposing such a policy on the population. There has been little or no consultation on this matter. There is no legislation establishing safe zones in our society. This is a policy that the government has unilaterally implemented on this nation and the population. All we say is that we are customers. We are customers in this country. And he's advising me that the honorable leader of our party has put out a statement on safe zones, right? So, but in the interim,
Yes.
all we will say is this, and I'll get a copy of that statement to you
Yes.
on that matter.
Yes.
The people are customers. Consumers have power. They will talk. Don't take the people for fools. Do not take the people for fools in this country. But you'll get a copy of the statement, I believe, shortly. My friend will have that copy. We will get a copy. And at least you'll be able to get out the more details on that outline as it relates to it.
Oh, okay. I just have one final question, if I can I pose it?
Yes.
Yes, certainly.
And how do you feel this is going to impact the economic well-being of the country going forward? Mr. Indar Singh spoke to inflation in the country. How do you think that this is going to impact Trinidad and Tobago's economic well-being and the further economic generation, for want of a better phrase, in the country going forward?
All I can tell you is that, let me quote something for you that I got, someone sent to me out of Tobago on that very crucial question that you have raised a short while ago. You see, we have to be very careful, right? Let's see. There's a statement that was sent out yesterday. I just want to find it for you. But once I'm looking at that statement, may I indicate that it is passing strange that we would want our economy to get back on track, right? And yet still, the government will pursue a policy, or has pursued a policy that is going to result in a situation in which the employers themselves would be confused. So that can have what I call negative consequences. Take, for example, a note I got from a source in Tobago. I can't reveal the name, right? But hear what the person said and tell me if that captures your concern. The person said, the impracticality of the safe zones for hotels, just to give an example, hotels, is mind-boggling. He said in the Tobago scenario, it defeats any vaccinate to operate benefits. That's what the person is saying from Tobago. Hotels here are 99% leisure guests. Okay? Goes on to say, with limited dining options, as it is on the island, where does an unvaccinated guest eat or drink? An unvaccinated guest, where does that person eat or drink? He's asking, who stay in a hotel, why stay rather in a hotel room for room service? Why are you going to stay in a hotel room for rooms of people who are unvaccinated? So the person is asking, and how or why do I send my vaccinated staff member to deliver food to an unvaccinated guest if the intent is to control the spread? Not to mention my unvaccinated housekeeper, who now insists that she or he does not fall under the requirement, mingling with both vaccinated and unvaccinated guests, who can also be lounging around the pool amongst both categories, especially since beaches are closed. People question the intent of any of these being public health measures or economic measures. So the person asks, on what basis was this formulated? Because this person is saying it is not on public health basis, it is not on economic basis, because he's showing that in his guest house or hotel in Tobago, this is confusion. So this policy of safe zone clearly and so on has not been properly thought out. And it appears when I see the Honorable Leader has a statement out, we will pass it on to you. I'm just giving you my preliminary thoughts, but the party's position will be reflected in that policy statement that we will send to you shortly.
Is it? Okay. So, members of the media, Trinidad and Tobago, we want to thank you for listening to the views of the United National Congress on behalf of myself, Rujanat Indar Singh, Member of Parliament for Cuba South, and Senator Wade Mack. We give you the undertaking that we will continue to hold this government to account in all its actions and ensure that the constitution of the country is not further encroached upon or decimated by this government, and we commit ourselves to ensure that the rights of all citizens, working class and outside of the working class, are upheld in the interest of the democracy of our country.
And members of the public, I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. Political barbarians are at our gates. It is time for you and me and the 1.4 million citizens of this country to erect barricades in defense of our democracy, in defense of the rule of law, in defense of our fundamental rights and freedoms that are now under direct threat by this government led by Keith Christopher Rowley. So we call on you, like the famous Bob Marley, stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up for your rights. Defend your democracy, defend the rule of law, defend your rights and freedom from these political barbarians who are seeking to establish a totalitarian and fascist state in our country. We have to fight for our rights. It is better you die standing on your feet than you die on your knees. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for your country. Stand up in defense of democracy. Stand up in defense of the rule of law. I thank you, brothers and sisters, and may you have a wonderful evening.